My mother never forgot Christmas. She remembered the candles, the specific brand of cider she liked, the order in which gifts should be opened. She remembered which cousin was difficult and which aunt needed to be seated away from the window. She forgot me the way you forget to return a library book. Not maliciously, just repeatedly, and without apparent consequence. I stopped expecting a call by the time I was 19. That's not a dramatic statement, it's a logistical one. You stop waiting for a bus that doesn't run on your street, you find another way. What neglect teaches you, if it's the quiet kind, is efficiency. I learned to mark my own calendar, to leave gatherings at the moment the energy shifted. Before someone remembered I hadn't been invited to the next one. I learned to need very little from people who had already demonstrated what they were willing to offer. I moved to a different city at 23. No announcement. Nobody asked. I worked in property law for 11 years. Not glamorous, mostly documentation, due diligence, title searches. I understood how ownership worked at a technical level, what it meant, what it required, what it protected. When Aldermore came on the market, I recognized it from a case file 3 years prior. A probate dispute. The estate had been tied up in litigation which kept the price reasonable and the interest low. I made an offer in October. By December I owned it. I told no one. I don't know how my sister found out. Possibly through a solicitor's assistant who recognized my name. Possibly through the kind of lateral family intelligence that operates without anyone acknowledging it operates at all. The calls began in February. My mother's voice on the phone had a particular quality I hadn't heard before, careful, almost practiced. She said she'd been thinking about me, that she'd always known I had it in me, that we'd lost time, the two of us, and perhaps now was the moment to find it again. I listened. I said very little. I noted the date and the approximate duration of the call in a document I'd started keeping, not out of paranoia, but out of professional habit. The invitations followed Easter. Then a birthday I had spent alone for the past decade. I attended neither. I was civil in my refusals. I did not explain myself. I should have anticipated the document. Looking back, I did anticipate it. I simply didn't expect it to be so poorly constructed. It was formatted to resemble a tenancy agreement. My name appeared in the body of the text as a secondary party, beneath my mother's name listed as primary tenant. The property address was correct. The legal language was approximate, close enough to be convincing to someone unfamiliar with how these things actually read, not close enough to survive 5 minutes with anyone who was someone had worked on it. That was the part I found. Not funny exactly, clarifying. They arrived on a Thursday morning in November. My mother, my sister Rachel, and a locksmith named Gary who I later learned had been told the property was a family estate, and the primary keyholder had locked herself out. I had been informed of the likely timeline by a contact I'd retained after the first phone call, a solicitor who specializes in property fraud, which is more common than people imagine and less cinematic than television suggests. I had filed a precautionary report with the local constabulary 8 days prior. A constable had agreed to be present at the property that morning, positioned inside, which is why the lights in the driveway were low, when Gary the locksmith began working on the front door. He did not know there were 2 people standing on the other side of it. The door opened before he finished. The constable introduced herself. She explained, briefly and without drama, that the property was privately owned, that a fraudulent tenancy document had been submitted as part of what appeared to be an attempt to gain unlawful entry, and that Gary was being detained pending further inquiry. Gary said he hadn't known. I believe he hadn't known. Rachel said nothing. She took a step backward and stayed there. My mother said my name. Then she said it again, louder, as though the second time might produce a different response from the universe. I stood in the doorway of a house that belonged to me and watched her face arrange itself through several expressions. Indignation. Then confusion. Then something that might have been the beginning of understanding if it had been given more time to develop. The constable asked them to move away from the entrance. They moved. I didn't feel what I had expected to feel. I had thought there might be something, relief, or the particular satisfaction of a long equation finally balancing. There was neither. There was just the cold November air coming through the open door, and the sound of Gary being spoken to quietly by the constable, and Rachel's shoes on the gravel as she walked back toward the car without being asked. My mother looked at me once more before she turned. I don't know what she was looking for. I closed the door. Aldermore is expensive to heat in January. The boiler is functional but old, and the east wing loses warmth faster than the rest of the building. I've been told this can be addressed structurally, though it will take time. I work from the library most mornings. The light is reasonable. Whether I feel at home here is a question I return to occasionally, without urgency. The answer hasn't arrived yet. I'm not waiting for it.